Persona is nothing without its social elements. It's what gives so much delicious context to the dungeon crawling, and what transforms what would usually be monotonous gameplay into a satisfying achievement as you progress through the behemoth story. But of the 3 games that feature social sim elements, only one perfects this core part of the franchise, and it does it way better than the other 2, and that's Persona 4. The reason that 4 does it better than the others is because of impactfulness. Every Persona game eventually becomes about saving humanity from an omnipotent being. Fair enough, it wouldn't be a JRPG without that. However, 3 and 5 have a story that builds up to that. The threat of global destruction is an appropriate escalation of the stakes from the previous dungeons. What's more, fighting the deity-like figure is almost mandatory unless you purposefully make the wrong decision to get a bad ending. While Persona 4 goes out of its way to hide the god behind a dialogue option most players wouldn't even consider hiding a super boss behind. So why do 3 and 5 have such bombastic endings on full display, while 4 tries to hide the ending as well as it possibly can? Like I said, impactfulness. The impact an event has on a story is directly related to its scale. Making the impact too big or too small creates a tonal mismatch that comes off as absurd rather than unexpected. For example, Alderaan being destroyed in Star Wars is an appropriate level of impactfulness for such a grand universe-spanning tale. But if the planet exploded in Breaking Bad, then that would be going way too far, and be overly impactful relative to the scale of the narrative. But this implies that Persona 3 and 5 have a different scale from Persona 4, and how can that be if they're in the same franchise? Simple, the physical world is much smaller in Persona 4. By that, I mean the world that the player inhabits, not the character. Inaba is a quiet small town in the Japanese countryside, which is funnily enough called the Inaka. So the area that our character can traverse is much smaller than the massive fictional and real cities in 3 and 5. The scale of the narrative reflects this. 3 and 5 are about saving the world or society, while 4 shrinks down the action to tracking a serial killer. When the size of the area shrinks, so too does the scope of the narrative. So after that extraordinarily long setup that surely made everyone click off the video, what does this have to do with the social elements of Persona 4? Well, so far I've only mentioned the negative examples of impactfulness, but the same rule applies to positive effects, and the social sim mechanics are all about improving the world around you. It's fair to say that as a Persona protagonist, you change the lives of everyone you form a relationship with. You create a vast community of friends because you interact with people from all different walks of life. In 3 and 5, helping a group of 20 people or so feels like a drop in the bucket, as you're overshadowed and surrounded by millions of others who are all dealing with their own problems, as we can see from the infinite shadow population. It can feel more special to help just a few people, but there are so many around us in the background who all have equally complex and distressing lives that it almost feels melancholic. But in Persona 4, the world is much smaller and tighter knit, so the positive effect we have on people feels much more impactful, as the positivity we spread reaches more people due to the enclosed area we're in. While I live in the largest city in New Zealand, my dad has often told me about growing up in small communities, how interwoven and familiar everyone is with each other, and how those communities can come together. Persona 4 is also the only game to offer social links through jobs you can apply for. This gives the protagonist a reason to apply for these jobs and makes the player feel like they're helping the community while also receiving gameplay and narrative rewards for doing so. Again, it feels more impactful to help babysit kids and look after the sick when the community feels much smaller, because you're improving the lives of more of the collective whole of the town, rather than just a small amount like in 3 and 5. There's also the matter of your family in 4. Dojima actively encourages you to go out and make friends and be part of the community. This is because he wants Nanako to keep being neglected, but another reason for that is that he wants you to be a model citizen. So by being a positive influence, you're making your father figure in this game proud, and you're out there making friends because you want to. In Persona 3, hanging out with friends feels like something your protagonist does because he wants to, which is fine, but there is no satisfaction. In 5, Sojiro forbids you from going out, so hanging out with your friends feels like rebellions, and also Igor is more suspiciously encouraging of you to form bonds with people, and since I could tell something was off about him, I felt cautious when my social links went up, like I was a pawn in his game. But in 4, there's nothing but positivity behind helping others, and it feels like it matters so much more due to the game's shrunken scope. I'll be back in 2 days. In the meantime, here's a video about why the social elements of Persona are the most essential part of the experience.